Okay, well, in the interest of time, it looks like there's still some people trickling in here, but let's get started. Thanks for joining us today on this webinar. My name's Mike Smitherman. I look after sales and marketing over here at Metric Insights. Quickly before we start, some usual housekeeping items. So lines are muted this morning as we got a larger group, but I encourage you to enter questions into the Q&A window, which you can access in the Zoom there, or feel free to put comments or make comments into the chat window. We'll keep an eye on that. Um, we're leaving plenty of time for discussion and Q&A towards the end. So this is also being recorded. I realize it's pretty early on the West Coast here, and we've had some registrations from there, but we are recording it, so we'll send out a link afterwards, and it'll be available to share with your colleagues or review after the fact. So with that, let's get kicked off. I'm super excited this morning to welcome Carsten Bange onto the call from BARC. I'm sure many of you are aware of BARC and the work that they do in the research, analysis, and consulting space in data and analytics. And Carsten personally, I know, has been a leading figure in the space for many years. So excited to have you on board, Carsten, and have the opportunity to hear from you and pick your brain a little bit this morning on some of the research that you're doing.
Good
Um,
morning.
just in terms of our agenda today, so we're primarily going to be diving into the latest research from BARC, uncovering sort of trends in the data and analytics and BI space that Carsten's team pulls together, I think, annually. So we're going to start by talking. I'm sure he's going to talk about the process and sharing the results from that survey. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how that relates to what we're seeing over here at Metric Insights in our customer and prospect base, and talk about some of the challenges that our customers are solving and how they're going about that. And then we're going to open it up for discussion. As I said before, I certainly have some questions for Carsten, and I'm sure the audience will as well. So please get those typed into the window, and we'll get those answered. So with that, Carsten, I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute and hand it over to you, and we'll get kicked off.
Excellent. Yeah, good morning to everyone. And thanks, Mike, for the nice introduction and for the invitation. And obviously, it's a big pleasure to share a few of our results here from our latest trend monitor. And that's really a quite peculiar study. I will explain in a minute why I think that is. I mean, if we look at trends in our industry, and I've been in the industry now for 25 years, I mean, there's always a lot of, let's call it hype going on, meaning topics that seem to be super hot, that a lot of vendors are especially talking about, that get a lot of media coverage and so on. But what we also see is there are topics that are pretty stable in terms of that they are being important for people for quite a long time. And I think our trend monitor is able to basically take a look at all of them, which makes it very interesting. So the trend monitor, to give you a little bit background, it's a pretty broad study. We had almost 1,800 participants and a pretty good demographic distribution. So different company sizes from different industries, different regions of the world. And what's important here, this is a user study. 74% of the people that answered our study here are from the users. So that's why we call it a user study. And we get an idea what users actually think about trends that are happening in the market. And the study is very special in another way too, that is consists only of one question. And the question is very simple. Please rate the importance of the following trends from 0 to 10. 10 is very important. And then we gave the participants a list of 20 topics that they should rate from 0 to 10. So quite easy, quite straightforward. And so basically a perceived rating of importance of trends. That's what we can see here. And without any further ado, here are the results in an overview. So these are the 20 topics we asked people to rate. And you see them now ordered by the importance that people actually put to these different trending topics or topics in itself. And you see there's quite a big spread from 4.5 to 8.1. 8.1 means that almost all people gave it, very high rating, meaning they think it's a very important topic, while an average score of less than 5 obviously shows it's very average or not so important for people. And if we take a look at the list here, there are a few observations we could share here. First thing is there are two topics really sticking out with 8 and 8.1, and quite a bit of a difference to also the next topics here, and that's data security and privacy and data quality management. And I think this surprises many people if they look at this, because I mean there is obviously a lot of talk about AI just the last days, obviously everywhere, everyone talking about DeepSeek and what's going on in China, and obviously, there are these topics of the day, let's call them that way. But then if we ask people what's important for you, for your job, for data and analytics in your enterprise usage, then it's quite obvious that these fundamental topics really come first. Yeah? So and we say a robust data foundation is super important, and people see it this way, and they rate it this way. Then what we have here is 3 topics that are really about empowering people, which I think is also very interesting that this comes up high in this way. So data-driven culture and data governance are next, both with 7.5, and then data and AI literacy, a little bit behind with 6.7. But very clearly topics that relate to people. Data-driven culture is really about how can I make a technology investment work? How can I make sure that people are actually using the technology I have invested in, the tools I've bought, the data foundations that I've built up? And for us, that's a major issue. We see that many organizations are starting to invest in this. They are building up roles for people that are looking after data culture, and that are really looking at the people side of things, how to enable them with literacy, how to make sure that data is actually accessible so a data culture can exist, to make sure that people not only have the skills, but also understand what they could do with data overall. And governance is really also about setting the guidelines, finding the right balance between setting guidelines, setting rules, but on the other hand, also to be not too strict, but also to basically make sure that people know what to do with data. That, for example, also data ethics is clear for people, that they are not afraid of using data, but that they have a good understanding what there is, what they could do with it, and what use also is in the data, what benefits they could achieve from it. All this, I think, is in these answers. And then we have self-service, also quite high up the list. I mean, obviously not a new topic, but still of high importance. And that's also our experience, that many organizations are still struggling with the whole topic of self-service. Has been around for a long time, but many are very clear now that it's not only about buying a few tools that maybe are very user-friendly or that let people do a lot of things in terms of functionality, but it's way more. It's a lot of governance again. It's a lot again, making sure that people understand the data, that data is discoverable, that data is actually available to them. And then also if they are starting, for example, to build their own models, to build their own KPIs, then to make sure they are not ending up in chaos, but that there are mechanisms in place that, for example, if these KPIs are being shared across the enterprise, that, for example, they are approved, or that not everyone can do that, like define an enterprise-wide KPI, for just as one example. So here's still, for many companies, still some things to be done, also seen in this result here. So people rate this as an important topic. And I noted down, yeah, needs all of the above. Yeah, you can only do self-service if you have a robust data foundation that people can then actually use and rely on to do their self-service analytics. And you need people that actually know what they're doing. They need to be empowered with that. And then finally, AI. This has had quite an upturn over the last years. So this increased in rating importance, obviously has increased for people, but it didn't come out number one, yeah, which some people might expect if it's a trend monitor. But if you give people these topics here to rate, then AI, yes, it is important, but it is not the most important topic of all here. Then we go further down the list, you see other topics, but they have one thing in common, and that's my let's say summary in a way of the results here. We get a pretty clear ranking if we segment it, segment the results also. So number one, very clearly, is the data foundation. Number two are really the people. So people are important, looking after their skills, their literacy, the culture in the organization, how data is actually being used and treated. And then, only then, are the technology topics. And I found this quite interesting to observe, that if we let users rate the importance of trends, then this is the result. And this is also how people look at this, by the way, for quite a while now. We run this trend monitor for many years, more than 10 now. And this overall rating, data, then people, then technology, that is actually quite consistent over the last years. You see the other topics on the list here. I will not go in any detail here, or we can also talk about that later. Maybe if there's any question, yeah, please just ask me, and we can discuss this also later in the webinar, I would say. But with that, Mike, maybe that was a first impression on the study we did and on the results, and I think maybe they're a little bit surprising in some regards here.
Yeah, very, very interesting, Carsten. Maybe surprising and not surprising in some respects. A quick question from me on sort of the logistics of it. How do you come up with your list of topics every year in
Oh,
terms of what
yeah.
you're rating on?
That's an analyst discussion, actually.
Okay.
And we just had it for the next edition because
Okay.
we did this. Yeah. So we look what's being discussed in the industry, in the media, on social media. We also look at how trends are developing. So if something is decreasing, is going down over the years, at some point we decide, okay, let's take it out. Doesn't seem to be interesting anymore. Let's put in some new topics. Yeah? And for example, last year we put in generative AI for data and analytics, yeah, which is quite a new topic to look at. And that's, for example, a new entry we had for last year.
Got it, got it. Well, I certainly have some questions, but let me take a few minutes to talk about kind of what we're seeing at Metric Insights as it relates to this and some of the challenges we're solving, and then we'll come back to this and discuss it in more detail.
Yeah.
But thanks for that. Let me share my screen here again. So probably unsurprisingly, we're hearing similar things in our prospect and customer base. And, for those that I'm sure I know a lot of people have been on Metric Insights webinars before who have joined today, but we primarily focus at the larger enterprise level, so big organizations, and in those organizations there is obviously no lack of data and reporting and analytics, and I think the focus is, as you've kind kind of identified there, shifting more towards things like governance and better user experience and increased engagement with analytics and reporting as it relates to self-service or anything else. And most importantly, I think a shift that I've seen is, in the current environment, making sure that any investments that are being made can actually be justified these days from essentially a monetary perspective. I think in the past, we've got away with creating content and driving things from a user experience perspective. But I think more and more people are having to justify their BI and data investments, and so that's something that's obviously conscious in our minds from a vendor perspective as we're building products and making sure we can address those challenges. But yeah, as it relates to what we're seeing out there, it's a very similar story, and particularly our focus is probably a little more towards the analytics and BI layer of data analytics and BI, but obviously it's all very much intertwined, and I think it still is somewhat surprising. I think that that the struggle that a lot of companies are having still relate to sort of a lack of engagement and usage of data and BI. And I think it's due in a lot of respects to the fact that it's somewhat the victim of its own success in terms of, BI and reporting and data is everywhere these days. Any organization of size has multiple tools and technologies out there, whether it's BI tools, analytics tools, machine learning, AI, whether it's reporting in operational applications, it's just everywhere. And in an environment now where we're encouraging self-service and there's lots of teams creating content, unsurprisingly, it ends up where there is a lot of clutter. There's a lot of obsolete content out there. There's a lot of duplicative content out there. And we're creating somewhat of quite a confusing and fragmented end user experience when it comes to consuming BI. And I think something else that sort of drives into that is a lack of consistent sort of metadata and a metadata strategy that makes it to the point of consumption. And by that I mean it kind of, we do a lot of work in sort of governing data, in sort of documenting data, in identifying sensitive information, defining metrics and calculations. But oftentimes that doesn't make it to the consumer of BI when they're looking at a report, and there's this disconnect there. So all these things are essentially causing a barrier in a lot of cases to self-service and data literacy and some of the things that Carsten mentioned quite near the top of the list, that companies are obviously trying to focus on to sort out. And so, what we see in the space and with our customers is really what they're striving towards is somewhat to tidy up that mess, if you like. So being able to get a handle on the content and the tools that they have out there, rationalize what they have, understand what content is important to users, and cleaning up, if you like, any obsolete and unused content that's out there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Putting in governance and content lifecycle management so that we keep a tidy environment when it comes to analytics and BI. So we talk a lot about data governance, I think, and that was obviously high on the list in the trend report. But making sure that extends to the BI and reporting layer as well, so that we're not just governing the data, we're also governing the reports that data is being consumed through. I mentioned before metadata management. I think again, we see a lot of talk of data governance and a lot of talk of documenting data at the database layer, for want of a better word, but making sure that that flows through as well to the point of consumption. So when a user is looking at a report and they're looking at metrics and KPIs, there's a consistent definition and they understand what they are. They can understand if those reports contain sensitive information or PII data, or whatever it might be, and know and get a level of literacy about what they're looking at and what they're consuming and using. And ultimately, I think customers are striving towards creating a more seamless user experience. And here I'm talking more about sort of the consumers of BI, the business users, those that I think there's a bit of a misnomer, and I'll be interested in your thoughts on this, Carsten, but where we talk a lot about self-service, and my personal opinion is that one of the reasons that that perhaps is still on the list and we haven't achieved it is a lot of business users in an organization aren't striving to be analysts. They have a job to do, and data can help that job. But if it's too much of a heavy lift, then they're not going to do it and they're just going to get on with their job. So self-service to me really covers a broader perspective. It's not just about being able to self-serve and create my own reports and analyze my own data and create my own models. It's also about being able to self-serve on the content that's out there already, making sure if I'm looking for a report, I'm finding the certified correct version of it with the necessary documentation. That means I can use it very quickly and get the information I need. Um, ultimately, we see companies are striving towards, yes, self-service in the way that I just described it, but making sure, BI consumers are getting the content they need, that they're looking at the right versions of things, that they're literate around what they're looking at, and that happens, in a few minutes every day as part of their job, and is not an overwhelming and confusing experience. Um, so let's talk a little bit about how our customers are looking to solve some of these challenges or address some of the focus areas that we've been talking about. And obviously, as Metric Insights, this is where we're focused in terms of our platform and what we're trying to achieve for our customers. At a very sort of high and logical level. But essentially, it all starts with being able to get visibility into all areas of data and BI in the organization. I think for years now we've struggled with sort of this silo concept where everything's sort of running in its own little vacuum out there. And so to be able to solve some of the challenges that people are putting focus on, it's important to have visibility into everything. And today, that's everything from BI tools to databases to data catalogs to data science and AI tools and catalogs. At Metric Insights, we put a lot of effort into, creating connections into these different layers and these different types of technologies to really solve three different areas. The first is what we refer to as sort of BI and analytics and data optimization, with a goal of sort of optimizing our total cost of ownership around our BI infrastructures and our data infrastructures. And what does that really mean? Well, it really means tidying up the mess that I sort of spoke about before. So doing things like identifying obsolete and unused content, whether that's reports or data sets or dashboards that are out there or models that are being created in our machine learning and AI tools. Being able to sort of identify when a report or a piece of analysis has sort of hit its shelf life and is no longer useful to the business. looking for potential duplicate reports. We all have those environments where you go out and you're looking for a report and there's, 10 different versions of it that have been created over the years. There's a lot of overlapping content because there's different analysts across the organization. They don't necessarily know what other people are creating. And so it's easier to create a new report than figure out what's there already. And so it creates this sort of clutter out there. So having a tool or a process to be able to identify those things and remove them and keep it tidy is critical. I would say this is becoming more critical as we see a move, trend we're seeing is a move to some of these cloud data infrastructures like Snowflake, like Databricks, where suddenly it's become a sort of pay-per-use model on those platforms where you're paying for compute power as you're running queries and things. So if you've got a lot of obsolete content out there and a lot of duplicative content that is running, suddenly there's a high cost for that you might have got away with in the past. So it's critical, in the world of justifying our BI programs that we're taking care of those. So, one area that is a big focus for customers is around this idea of BI optimization or data optimization and understanding those things. Kind of the bread and butter that we've been up to at Metric Insights here over the past decade is focused around the end user of BI and addressing this problem that I spoke about where BI exists everywhere in the organization in lots of different tools and technologies, and it being overwhelming for users to understand what they should be looking at, which causes low engagement and low ROI on our content. So we do that through the concept of what we call a BI portal, really driving towards providing a single point of access to search and find certified content in an organization, regardless of where it might have been created from a tool perspective. And doing it in a way where when I find a report that I'm interested in, as I spoke about before, having comprehensive metadata around it, understanding where the data is coming from a lineage perspective, having the necessary documentation around things like metric definitions and calculations so that I am becoming literate around the content that I'm using. And then again, what I mentioned before, understanding the personas that we're giving BI and analytics to, and realizing that some of those are not striving to be analysts every day. So giving them the content that they need in a seamless way that makes it easy for them to consume it and access it on a daily basis. So the idea of a centralized portal is critical. And then I think the third thing that we're seeing is targeted at the analyst and the creator of analytics and their world changing. Obviously AI was not at the top of the list, and we saw that, but as we move into a world where self-service is becoming more critical and there's machine learning and AI taking off. Making sure analysts have a single place to go to discover all these available data assets that are out there and reporting assets that are out there to be able to understand what's there already or what they can use or what they need to create when it comes to solving a particular business question that they have. So, in the world today, it's quite challenging as an analyst to say, okay, I'm getting asked this business question or I'm trying to solve this particular problem. What do we have today that might help me with that? Whether it's data sets, whether it's machine learning models, whether it's reports that exist already in an organization where there's multiple teams creating that content, that can be challenging. So similar to sort of the BI portal for the business consumer, having a set of a marketplace, if you like, for a governed set of assets that analysts can discover and create is critical to organizations as well. So that's at a very that's kind of my summary of kind of how I see what you're seeing in the trend report, Carsten, as it relates to sort of what we're seeing on the ground with our customers. And I do think there, unsurprisingly, is a lot of overlap in terms of the focus. I think maybe what's surprising is that we haven't made more progress in some of these areas as organizations, but I guess they're complex problems to solve. But yeah, let's maybe. I certainly have some questions for you. So let's maybe delve into some of the study details more. And again, to the audience out there, I'd encourage you to enter any questions that you may have as we go through that. And I'm just going to bring up the Q&A window as we do that as well. Um, so I'm curious, Carsten, you mentioned, so you talked about sort of what you're seeing today or in the last report. Um, what are some of the changes in trends that you've seen over the years? I'm curious how things have sort of moved in that list. You mentioned how you sort of came up with the list and things come in and out, but are you seeing trends out there? And Phil, I know you've got some of this in the report, so if there's things you want to share, let me know and I can pass the screen back to you. But yeah, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, obviously that's something that's always interesting. What changes every year, and maybe there are even some long-term trends.
Yeah.
First of all, what we can observe is on the top of the list, the most important trends, they are pretty stable. I mean, there are a few changes, a little bit up and down, but that's pretty stable. But there are a few topics that really increased in importance over the last years. One is obviously AI. So
Hmm.
that's we can very clearly see the ChatGPT moment also in the data. Yeah, that was also the year when once we asked people, the perceived importance of AI then increased quite massively. So that's pretty clear. And then there's another topic, I think that also relates very well to what you just explained and showed what you are observing. So that's the whole topic around data catalogs, data intelligence platforms. Um, in 2020, 2021, that was really at the bottom of the list. And now it's on ninth place. So it has gone really up and still shows pretty good growth. And the reason for that, I think, is exactly what you just explained. Yeah. So the assets are in a way becoming more and more data assets, BI assets, you name it. And there's an increasing need for people and companies to understand what they have, what they can use. And I think, yeah, you named it exactly how I also see it and what I would also understand as an explanation to this trend. Um, Maybe one thing to add, there is also decision intelligence and data products, also two trends that are up on the rise, and they also made significant improvements or increased in the last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the things at the top that you say are stable year on year, is that because they just have to be ongoing focus in those areas for customers, or are they struggling to solve those challenges, therefore they stay up there, or what's your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
My thought is it's simply not going away. It's
Right.
simply something that, yeah, looking after data security and privacy,
Yeah.
I mean, that's so fundamental. It's at the core of a lot of data strategies, data programs I'm seeing. So I think that's pretty clear. But data governance and data quality, I mean, th those are topics we are talking about for 20 years or so. It's really nothing new, but these are topics that are really hard to tackle, to be successful with, and the importance is there, but it's also there because it's not a solved problem. It's not something where people say, "Hey, nothing to worry about," but they do worry about that, and it's I think it's really yeah, it's not easy,
Yeah.
and it's something people still want to and have to look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. Data governance, I feel, has become you're right, it's been around forever and it's become somewhat of a hot topic again, I feel, in the last year or two.
Mhm.
And I think what I see is it's almost like, no one can say they don't need data governance, right? Everyone needs data governance. Everyone has to have a data governance program. But I think to your point, it's a difficult problem to solve in this world where things are exploding, and we see a lot of companies struggling with what to do there. I think they get the basics under their hat, if you like. So, obviously you have to be compliant from a regulatory perspective or whatever it might be. And I think, perhaps they're the easier things to solve, but as you think about a wider governance strategy for data and for analytics and what that means, it can be an overwhelming thing to start addressing, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so quick questions popped up here from Gerard. Any point of view on the impact of Gen AI on BI and visualization? Could this potentially reduce the need for prepared visualizations, i.e. with consumer data products through personal prompts and agents? Yeah, I guess the AI discussion is unavoidable. So what's your opinion on that, Carsten?
Um, I think there's several effects to observe. One is
Mm.
that any single vendor in the space is now adopting Gen AI, some more, some less,
Yeah.
but it's also helping the user experience, the some automation, some efficiency topics in these tools. So I think that's one
Hmm.
thing we can observe here.
Yeah.
I think the question also, but also it leads a little bit to another area, and that's the question, can Gen AI maybe replace BI, or
Right.
is now an LLM, is that the new BI tool? And I think that's a bit early stage right now. We have to remember that the fundamental technology is mostly is focused on text, or on, let's say, on unstructured data, text, audio, video, um, and images, obviously. And it is definitely the strategy of the vendors, of the ones that build LLMs, to also improve in analyzing data, in handling structured data. But I would say there's still a bit of way to go. We see these improvements. And I think for certain topics, you can already use that.
Mm.
But whether you really want to do that in terms of a user experience, in terms of cost also, that remains to be seen. And I think we are not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think it's an interesting question because I think, you know, to get, and I think the question is focused a little bit around sort of the end user being able to do that. So the need for, as you say, the need to not have sort of BI anymore in its package form. I think it relies on everything that you've identified in the trend report at the top, right? So, there's
Yeah.
still the challenge of knowing which data set to use and, is that data actually telling me what I think it's telling me before I try and create these visualizations? So, I see what the BI vendors have been doing is what's been described in the question, but there's an assumption there in a lot of cases that you've picked the right data set to build that visualization on. And I think that problem hasn't been solved. And we're guilty for going down the AI route as well as a vendor. And, what we're looking at it for initially is in our portal concept to say, okay, can we use a more conversational approach to uncover the content that I'm interested in? So, I can ask what we call our concierge to say, okay, I'm trying to solve this business process, this business problem, or answer this business question. What are the data sets and reports and content out there that might help me solve it? Rather than, give me the answer, because I think we're not quite there yet in having the confidence to say, okay, give me the answer. I think there's still a high risk that it could come back with the wrong answer, because we haven't necessarily got the structure in place to support that yet.
Yeah. But I think that's a major trend, that these more conversational interfaces are replacing or adding to or complementing what we already have.
Mm,
And that could actually indeed reduce the number of prepared visualizations in the meaning that, okay, if I now can actually ask my questions, then
mm,
and that works eventually, then I would probably need less prepared visualizations because I could rely on that if I have a question, I can simply ask it.
mm.
In that regard, the answer to the question is probably yes. Yeah.
Yep. It also creates an even bigger headache on the governance side of things. So I feel, right? So if everyone is creating effectively their own BI, suddenly we're creating a whole world of ungoverned content again, potentially. So um, yes, indeed, Gerard, I just saw your comment. Yeah, better metadata around the data itself, governance around the data itself to be able to instigate something like that. Um, what is so another conversation, I think I saw this on your list, Carsten. Another conversation that I feel has been going on for years is around the transition to cloud, and I guess this is technology focused and more, but I feel like it's a conversation that's been going on forever. It's happening, I think, in other areas of the organization for other types of technologies. It's clearly happening somewhat on the data side with tools like Snowflake and Databricks, but what are you seeing in the space? Is there a sort of renewed energy about moving BI analytics data to the cloud, or is that still slow going?
Well, I don't see necessarily renewed, but ongoing.
Mm,
I think
right.
that's a strong trend. It's pretty clear. You mentioned the largest vendors that are in a way driving it, or us, yeah, that
Mm,
got very popular over the last years and show that companies are willing to invest in it. What we see in the data is quite a difference in geographies. So it's still the case that in Europe, the pickup or the penetration of cloud-based software is lower than in North America, for example.
mm,
That's one thing to observe. And what we also see increasingly, you cannot see that directly in the trend monitor, but we definitely see it in our conversations and also in other research, is there's increasing cost discussion going on. So you also mentioned that a little bit in your part,
mm,
that the cost of these cloud data platforms or generally of software as a service is becoming a major concern. And
mhm.
that people get more concerned about, what do I actually do there? Up to the point that you start to even reduce your workloads. Yeah, you try to do less just because out of cost reason.
Yep.
And I think that's also something to that we can observe in the cloud
Yeah.
side.
No, it's interesting. I won't mention the customer name, obviously, but yeah, we're seeing that. So we're definitely seeing customers moving there and perhaps not fully understanding the consequences of, as you've just said. So we had one customer who they made the move to the cloud. They're running, a cloud. I think it's Databricks that they're using, but suddenly at the end of the month, they saw a significant unexpected spike in their database spend, and it was not obvious to figure out where that was coming from in an environment where you've got tens of thousands of queries running and reports and dashboards out there. Having visibility into what's causing that is actually quite difficult to uncover. So yeah, that's definitely some of the work we're looking at is as we have connections to all these things to be able to highlight some of those areas. But you're right. I think on the flip side, I do think it's an opportunity to force a rationalization effort and understand that what you're creating is useful and being used and worth it. But yeah, maybe it does block creativity as well, right? If there's this overriding thing of what is this going to cost, right? As I'm doing it, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, um, quick question about so I know you touched on at the beginning that your trend survey covers various different industries and company sizes, I guess. Do you see certain trends within that where there's differences maybe for companies who or industries who are more sort of leading in the data space, or yeah, are there any sort of trends within trends that you see, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, what we have is the demographics of the
Okay.
people
Yeah.
answered. So we can actually then look into industries, company sizes, also roles of people. And there's a lot of detailed analysis available here. What I would like to highlight is what we can also do is we can filter out the best in class companies. And this is a self-assessment that people do.
Mhm.
And the question is basically, is your company using data analytics in a more beneficial way as your biggest competitors? So it's
Mm.
a bit of an self-assessment in terms of yeah, competition and your role in the industry or where you are in the industry in regards of using data. And these best-in-class results, I think these are always super interesting. And what we found, interestingly, this year, where the biggest spread is between best-in-class companies and we call them laggards, so companies
Mm.
that or people that say themselves, yes, we are worse than our biggest competitors. We are not using data as good as they do. And there are two topics that showed a very big spread. And those are one is cloud, actually. So the
Mm.
best in class companies put a much higher importance to cloud technology, but also, interestingly, to data warehouse modernization.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's related. Often, data warehouse modernization means moving to
Move
a
to.
cloud-based software.
Mm.
But still, that this topic came up surprised me too. And it also shows, I mean, we are talking about yeah, modern data architectures, lake houses, and so on for a long time, but we shouldn't forget there's still a lot of data warehouses out there.
Yeah.
And they also need to be modernized because they create value. Yeah, people have invested in them. And I think that reminds us here that there is an importance, especially for the best-in-class companies, to get these systems also modernized.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
one,
Sorry, go on.
yeah, I just wanted to add,
Mm.
there's another topic that shows up here in the best-in-class versus laggards analysis. That's data products. I think
Mm.
that's also quite interesting because we see this shift that companies are using more and more this idea of treating data as a product. And we see that here in the data that the best-in-class companies are, yeah, putting this to a higher importance. Yeah, they think this is a more important trend. But this also relates what we are seeing that it's often the early movers or the best-in-class companies that are moving into this direction of data products, yeah, way more quickly than other companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, certainly the warehouse modernization, the move to cloud, the cost discussion that we just had
Mhm.
is an interesting one for sure. Not surprising, but something people will have to get a handle on. Talk to me a little bit more about data products, maybe to close out here. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
feel like that's a term that I've heard at every conference I went to last year, and
Mhm.
everyone's trying to define what that actually means in practicality. What are you seeing out there as in terms of what are companies really trying to do in that area?
Mhm. I think first of all, it's appealing because it's a new approach. It's not running projects around data and analytics, but thinking about a product. And the product has many different properties, but the key thing is has to provide value to its customers. So you are thinking about customers, users of this data product. You think in modules, it has a life cycle and so on. So all the properties of a product apply here. And that I think is very beneficial because a project has a few problems. Like it starts with having an end. And as we all know, yeah, what we do here in data and analytics typically is ongoing. You cannot really say, okay, I do this and then I'm done. But you typically you have to yeah, touch it again, change it, improve it, and so on.
Hmm.
And so there are many, I think, beneficial properties to data products. There's a second big trend going on in the industry or in companies that is this whole decentralization, meaning we put more emphasis and we put also more responsibility to local teams, to domains, to business units, you name it. However, these decentralized organizational units are being called, it doesn't really matter. But we see that there's more responsibility being taken or being assigned to these. And this often goes hand in hand with this idea of data products.
Mm.
That people say, okay, but if you do this now in a more decentralized ways, please, then at least build data products and make sure that you also provide them to the organization, which is a new concept as well, that we also have to share them. And
Yeah.
then we are creating these types of marketplaces, and I would say the portal you're having is
Yeah.
already maybe very close to a marketplace, or maybe is already the
Yeah.
marketplace. Yeah,
Yeah.
that. But this whole concept, I think, really comes to life with this idea of data products behind it. That you need to make sure this is consumable, this is valuable for people, and then you have to or want to share it. And so these are just a few aspects of data products, but maybe I could give you a bit of ideas how we think about it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. No, for sure. I think, you're right. Naturally our portal and the marketplace work we're doing sort of ties into that, and we're seeing more of it. I just saw a question pop up here. I think we've got a few more minutes here. What are the top topics for laggers? Why do they feel they're in this category? Is it because their leadership are not interested in data? It's a good question.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason. So, as I said, it's a self-assessment, and the question is, why do they feel they're in this category? Obviously, I think often people have a pretty good idea of what's going on in their competition if they maybe change jobs or if they meet at industry conferences or if they
Mm,
hear the stories from other companies, what they are achieving with data and so on. So
mm,
that's, I think, where this comes from. But why do they end up as a laggard? That I think has often multiple reasons. But we call it data leadership. I think is pretty high up on the topic because it's not only interest, but it's often interest or lack of interest comes with lack of resources and lack of investment, and that's often the number one reason we are hearing why data and analytics is not really,
mm,
getting to its full potential in an organization. It's often lack of investment, and then data culture often is also very high up on the list. Yeah, that people say, hey, okay, we just don't have the culture in the organization. People are overall not interested, not only leadership, but leadership for sure has influence on that.
mhm,
But that people are not interested, not skilled, but there's also not the right mindset.
mm. Makes sense. So where are they focusing from an interest perspective then? The laggers, I guess, laggards in terms of topics that they're thinking about.
Actually, I don't have it
You
exactly
don't?
here, but I
Okay.
have to. We
Okay.
see a little bit of a shift to topics like, let me see here, we have data preparation is higher up on the
Right.
list, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the foundational stuff that we were
Hmm.
doing a few years, I guess top of the list a few years ago for you is
Yeah,
likely.
yeah. That's good.
Good. Well, I guess my final question, so if people are interested in getting their hands on the study and looking at it in more detail, I assume they can reach out to you.
Yes, happy
Yeah.
to share that. I can send out a PDF, and that
Um,
has then also detailed analysis.
mm,
As I said, yeah, each of the 20 trends, we are breaking it down for the demographics, and there's a lot more I
a lot
think,
more detail.
interesting stuff in there.
Great. Well, I know we're coming towards the top of the hour here, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I super appreciate your time today, Carsten. It's great to connect again across these time zones, but I know a lot of people were able to join, and I know a lot more people registered, so we'll get that link out to them and they can view the recording here. But look forward to seeing you soon at a conference, and thanks for your time and thanks for everyone who joined.
Thank you.